There are over 40 million acres of perfectly manicured bright green lawn in the United States right now.
Which is just a staggering number when you actually visualize it.
Right. And if you put all that together, it's actually the single largest irrigated crop in the entire country.
Yeah, bigger than corn, bigger than wheat.
Exactly. We pour more water, more fertilizer, and, just more resources into grass than we do into the food we actually eat.
And biologically speaking, that 40 million acres is basically an absolute wasteland.
It's a green desert.
Yeah, uninhabitable.
We have literally terraformed our immediate surroundings into these environments that actively repel the foundational layers of the global food web.
And that terraforming, or really undoing it, is exactly what we are dismantling today. So welcome to the Deep Dive.
Glad to be here.
Our mission today for you, the listener, is to explore this quiet, kind of decentralized but radically disruptive movement.
It's completely redefining how we approach environmental collapse. Right. We're looking at how ordinary people are bypassing failing institutions to rebuild the biodome literally from the dirt in their own backyards.
Round up. Literally.
And I want to mention right at the top, the foundational texts for today's session are curated from an incredible collection called Echoes from the Edge with the Lone Wolf.
The curation in that collection is just phenomenal.
It really is. So we are analyzing a stack of sources today that includes ground-level rebirth, resilience through distribution, the distributed ecosystem.
Plus the imperative of action, the invitation of return, and of course the namesake manifesto, the Lone Wolf Protocol.
So the core theme across all these writings is this massive historical divergence we're seeing.
Yeah, a real splitting of the paths.
Right. On one side, we have the continuation of industrial ecological simplification, vast chemically treated monocultures.
The green deserts.
Exactly. But diverging sharply away from that is this ground-level, highly intentional restoration movement.
Which is what makes this so fascinating.
Now, a quick but necessary disclaimer before we get into the mechanics of this. These sources offer some pretty heavy critiques of large systems, institutional inertia, and governmental policies.
They definitely pull no punches.
No, they don't. However, this deep dive is not about taking political sides.
Absolutely not.
Whether your environmental leanings are left, right, or center, we are keeping this exploration strictly impartial.
We're entirely focused on the actual ecological actions detailed in the texts.
Right, the biological realities they address and the underlying philosophies of the people doing the work.
Our goal here is to just dissect the mechanism. We are looking at the how and the why of localized ecological restoration, totally outside the arena of partisan policy.
So let's establish that why. Because before you can understand why someone is out in their yard, tearing up perfectly good sod to plant goldenrod and milkweed,
you really have to understand the philosophical shift that pushed them to do it.
Exactly. The source text, the Lone Wolf Protocol, presents a very stark, very uncompromising claim.
It does.
It states, in no uncertain terms, no one is coming to fix this.
And that phrase, it operates as the psychological bedrock for this entire movement.
It's a heavy thing to accept.
It is. The text introduces this concept of radical autonomy. People typically look at the terrifying scale of environmental decline, right? Species extinction rates, habitat loss.
Aquifer depletion, all the big scary metrics.
Yeah, and they operate under the assumption that a massive global problem inherently requires a massive centralized top-down solution.
Which, the logic seems sound on the surface.
It does make sense intuitively.
Look, if it's a planet-sized problem, we need a planet-sized piece of legislation to fix it. We expect a coordinated rescue.
But the sources argue that this assumption is a fatal trap.
A trap.
Yeah, because of the severe mismatch in timelines.
Okay, unpack that timeline mismatch for us.
Well, the overarching systems, the massive industries, the international climate summits, they move at a bureaucratic pace.
Right, very slow.
They measure progress in fiscal quarters, in 10-year benchmark goals, in election cycles. But the ecosystem operates on a biological timeline.
Right, a completely different clock.
Exactly. A solitary native bee has a lifespan of just a few weeks. It needs nectar, pollen, and a nesting site today.
It can't exactly file an extension.
No. It cannot wait for a committee to draft a resolution on habitat preservation in 2030.
Wow, yeah.
So radical autonomy is the realization that while you wait for the slow-moving machinery of global consensus, the physical decline of the ecosystem is happening unabated right outside your front door.
Okay, but I have to push back on this premise just a bit.
Go for it.
Telling people no one is coming and focusing entirely on your own backyard, doesn't that border on cynical?
How so?
Well, it sounds dangerously close to giving up on systemic corporate regulation. If a handful of multinational corporations are responsible for the vast majority of ecological degradation, focusing on suburban backyards feels like, I don't know, absolving the real culprits of responsibility.
It's a vital critique. But the texts address this, not through cynicism, but through raw biological pragmatism.
Okay.
The argument isn't that systemic regulation shouldn't exist or that corporate responsibility is a myth.
Right.
The argument is that the immediate localized survival of the biodome cannot survive the waiting period for those massive ships to turn around.
Oh, let's use that ship analogy. That makes it clear.
Yeah, it really does.
So if you are standing on a dock and you see someone drowning 50 feet away, relying solely on systemic solutions is like getting on a radio.
And trying to hail a massive cargo ship that is 20 miles out at sea.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You're asking the captain to change course, navigate through a bureaucracy of maritime laws, and eventually come rescue the swimmer.
And by the time the cargo ship actually arrives, the biological reality of the swimmer has already concluded.
They have drowned.
They've drowned.
Exactly. So radical autonomy is simply recognizing that you have a life preserver in your hands right now.
Yes.
Throwing the life preserver doesn't mean you don't care about maritime safety laws. Not at all. It just means you recognize that an immediate physical crisis requires an immediate physical action.
And the sources position this as a binary choice.
Right.
Once you recognize that timeline mismatch, you are forced to choose between remaining in what they term observation mode or stepping into action.
Observation mode, that's standing on the dock with the radio.
Right. You're hyper-aware of the drowning, tracking the cargo ship's progress, but doing absolutely nothing with the life preserver in your hand.
While action mode requires a decision to intervene in the specific environment over which you have absolute dictatorial control.
Exactly. Your own space.
Which brings us to a really uncomfortable concept detailed in the text, the imperative of action.
Oh, this part is fascinating.
It really is.
Yeah.
Because if observation mode is a trap, we have to look at what keeps us stuck in it.
And the text points the finger at the very thing modern society values most.
Right, environmental awareness.
The psychological breakdown of awareness in these sources is just brilliant.
It hits hard.
It does. We live in a digital age where awareness functions as a commodity and like a social currency.
We share devastating articles about the collapse of insect populations on our feeds.
We watch high-definition documentaries about deforestation.
We observe the silence in fields that used to be deafening with crickets.
And we feel a profound emotional response to it.
We do. We feel grief, we feel anger, deep concern.
And here is where the psychological trap springs.
Right.
Our brains register that massive expenditure of emotional energy as participation.
Because you felt deeply about the ecological collapse, you feel as though you have done something to combat it.
Exactly. The text argues that awareness, when it's totally devoid of physical action, actually functions as a buffer.
It creates distance.
Precisely. It allows you to be an educated spectator to a tragedy.
Wow. An educated spectator?
You bear witness to the decline without ever having to engage physically with the soil.
The critical shift demanded by the imperative of action is changing the fundamental question you ask yourself.
Right, the internal narrative.
You must transition from asking, what is happening to the world out there, to asking, what am I actively doing within my own physical perimeter?
I love the analogy you were mentioning earlier about this.
Oh, the fitness one. Yeah, think about your own habits for a second. Let's say you want to get into peak physical shape.
Okay.
You buy 20 books on human anatomy, you subscribe to daily fitness podcasts.
You memorize the exact biomechanics of muscle hypertrophy and cardiovascular endurance.
Right, you possess a staggering level of physical fitness awareness.
You know all the theory.
But if you never actually put on your running shoes and leave the house, your physical reality remains entirely unchanged.
Not a single calorie burned.
Exactly. Your awareness just makes you feel guilty while you sit on the couch.
And that is the exact relationship the average modern citizen has with the environment.
It is. We just sit on the couch feeling guilty about the documentaries.
And the texts are ruthless on this point.
Yeah.
The biodome is entirely indifferent to your awareness.
It doesn't care.
It does not care about your guilt, your profound sadness over a polar bear, or your sophisticated understanding of climate models.
Nature does not recognize human authority or good intentions.
It responds exclusively to physical mass and physical action.
So what are the actual unremarkable physical actions the text highlights? Because stepping out of observation mode doesn't mean chaining yourself to an old-growth redwood.
No, it doesn't. It focuses on the mundane, hyper-localized choices.
Like what?
Like what specific seed do you press into the soil outside your door?
What chemical compound do you spray or refuse to spray on a weed?
Right. What do you allow to undergo the messy process of decay, and what do you meticulously bag up and send to a landfill?
We are so socially conditioned to believe that only massive, globally coordinated impacts matter.
But ecosystems do not operate on the logic of human
They
grandiosity.
just don't.
They operate on sustained, localized, repetitive biological patterns.
So let's shift into the mechanics. If someone decides to put down the fitness book and actually go for a walk, if they want to move from passive awareness to active agency, what does that look like on the ground?
This is where we get into the core of the microecosystem movement, detailed in ground-level rebirth.
This is where the philosophy translates into dirt, roots, and insects.
Exactly. The sources describe this quiet rebellion happening in ordinary suburban and urban neighborhoods.
People are systematically dismantling those 40 million acres of sterile green lawns.
They are executing what the text calls a functional correction.
I love that phrase, functional correction.
It's so precise. They are allowing their spaces to become wild, replacing turf grass with native flora, reintroducing shallow water sources.
And completely halting the use of synthetic chemical inputs.
Right. The term functional correction is critical because it moves the entire conversation away from aesthetics.
Because a manicured lawn is just an aesthetic choice.
Yeah, it serves no biological function whatsoever.
None. To achieve a functional correction, the text to the distributed ecosystem outlines a community blueprint built on 3 non-negotiable principles.
Right. The first one is habitat restoration.
Which specifically requires native plants.
Yes.
Let's pause on that, because the distinction between a plant and a native plant is something most people don't fully grasp.
It's probably the most misunderstood part of this whole movement.
Yeah, because a garden center is full of beautiful, blooming flowers from all over the world.
Sure, they look great.
So why isn't planting a Japanese maple or a European shrub in, say, Ohio considered habitat restoration?
Because the biological mechanism of coevolution.
Okay, break that down.
Well, insects and plants have been locked in a chemical arms race for millions of years.
An arms race.
Yeah. Plants develop toxic compounds in their leaves to avoid being eaten. That's their defense.
Right, they don't want to be salad.
Exactly. Over thousands of generations, specific local insects evolve the specific enzymes required to digest those specific local plant toxins.
So it's very specialized.
It is a biological lock and key.
So a native caterpillar literally cannot physically digest an exotic leaf, even if it looks perfectly green and healthy to us.
Exactly. When you plant an exotic ornamental species, you are essentially placing plastic fruit in the ecosystem.
Wow, plastic fruit. That paints a picture.
Right. It looks nice to humans, but the local insect population will starve to death sitting right on top of it.
Because they don't have the key for that lock.
They cannot recognize it as food, nor can they digest it. Habitat restoration means reinserting the specific native host plants that local insects have evolved to rely on.
Think of the monarch butterfly and milkweed.
Perfect example. The monarch caterpillar cannot survive on anything else. No milkweed, no monarchs.
That makes the museum analogy I was thinking of even more accurate.
Oh, the museum versus the kitchen.
Yeah. The traditional American yard filled with exotic ornamental plants and chemically treated grass is like a pristine, sterile green carpet in a museum.
It is highly controlled.
It looks very neat, but it is entirely lifeless. It's a display case.
Right, you don't touch anything in a museum.
But a native microecosystem undergoing a functional correction is like stepping out of the museum and walking into a bustling, chaotic restaurant kitchen.
And the messiness is the point.
Exactly. In a working kitchen, there are vegetable scraps on the floor, water boiling over, loud noises, and constant movement.
It looks messy to someone used to a sterile museum.
But that messiness is the byproduct of nourishment being created.
The sterile green carpet feeds absolutely no one.
And the messy kitchen feeds the entire neighborhood.
The texts are arguing that we have to stop living in outdoor display cases and start building biological kitchens.
And that leads directly to the second principle of the community blueprint.
Chemical reduction.
Right, you cannot operate a biological kitchen while simultaneously spraying neurotoxins everywhere.
It just doesn't work. We have this contradictory modern habit of planting flowers to attract pollinators.
And then aggressively spraying pesticides to kill the caterpillars that are eating the leaves.
We want the butterflies, but we refuse to tolerate the caterpillars. It's an insane paradox.
It really is. Furthermore, the texts point out the systemic nature of modern chemicals, specifically neonicotinoids.
Yeah, these aren't just topical sprays that wash off in the rain.
They are systemic.
Meaning, when applied to the soil or the seed, the plant absorbs the chemical into its actual vascular system.
So it's inside the plant itself.
Right. The neurotoxin becomes present in the actual pollen and nectar of the flower.
Oh, wow.
So when a bee visits, it ingests a compound that directly attacks its central nervous system, causing paralysis and death.
So eliminating these inputs is a non-negotiable prerequisite for a functional correction.
You can't invite them to the kitchen and then poison the food.
And the third principle is resource availability.
Yes, because life requires a continuous loop.
Meaning what exactly?
Well, this means a reliable, uncontaminated water source. And it means shelter for the winter.
Shelter. Like bug hotels.
Or just natural debris. Like 70% of native bee species don't live in hives.
Really? 70%?
Yeah, they are solitary, and they nest in the ground or inside hollow plant stems.
So when you aggressively cut back all your dead plant stalks in the fall,
And bag up all your leaves to make the yard look clean.
you are literally throwing away the dormant pupa of next year's pollinator generation.
You're bagging up the babies and sending them to the dump.
That's horrifying. So resource availability means leaving the organic debris where it falls.
Exactly. Let the leaves lie.
But this triggers the most obvious and frankly the most skeptical question. I know anyone listening who has ever felt overwhelmed by climate data is asking this right now.
Let's hear it.
Let's say you do everything perfectly. You plant the native host plants, you stop spraying neonicotinoids, you leave the hollow stems for the solitary bees.
You follow the blueprint.
Right. How does a single messy 50 by 50 foot backyard or a tiny balcony with a water dish have any actual impact on the global biodome?
It feels mathematically insignificant.
It really does, like emptying the ocean with a teaspoon.
Well, it feels insignificant if you are evaluating it through the lens of centralized systems.
Which is how we evaluate everything.
Exactly. Our modern society relies entirely on massive, centralized architecture. Think of the electrical grid.
Okay, power is generated at a single, massive, centralized plant and then distributed outward.
And when a storm hits that central plant,
Millions of people lose power instantly.
precisely. Centralized systems are inherently fragile because they rely on single points of failure.
Right, cut the head off the snake.
But as the text Resilience through Distribution and the Distributed Ecosystem explain, nature does not operate, rebuild, or sustain itself through centralization.
Nature operates through decentralized networks.
Yes.
So how does a decentralized ecological network function in practice?
Through connectivity. Think of it structurally. A single bee or butterfly cannot cross a 5-mile expanse of concrete parking lots and chemically treated sterile grass.
Because there's no food or shelter.
That environment is a lethal desert. They will exhaust their energy reserves and die attempting to navigate it.
So they just get stuck where they are.
Right. Isolated pockets of nature remain trapped and eventually collapse due to lack of genetic diversity.
They become stranded islands.
Yes. But when one homeowner converts their yard to a native habitat
And someone 3 streets over does the same.
and a local library allows native wildflowers to grow on their perimeter.
These spaces act as biological stepping stones.
Exactly. The texts call them corridors. Suddenly, that 5-mile desert has a safe harbor every few hundred yards.
So the pollinator can feed, rest, find mates, and migrate.
By engaging in distributed action, individuals are literally stitching the fragmented map of the ecosystem back together.
This concept of decentralized resilience is just fascinating. It reminds me of the underground mycelial networks of fungi that connect tree roots in a forest.
Oh, that's a perfect parallel.
Yeah, because there is no brain or central server controlling the forest floor.
No CEO of the forest.
Right, it's millions of individual hyperlocal interactions that collectively create an indestructible adaptive web.
That is the exact biological parallel. In a distributed model, if one yard gets paved over, if one node in the network is destroyed, the entire system doesn't experience a catastrophic failure.
The network simply reroutes the biological traffic to the surviving yards nearby.
Exactly. Decentralized resilience means the system can absorb immense localized damage and still function globally.
But I'm going to push back on the scaling aspect of this.
There.
I understand the math of a decentralized network. But humans are deeply entrenched in their cultural
We
habits.
love our lawns.
We have entire industries dedicated to lawn care. We have homeowner associations that will literally fine you for letting your grass grow past 3 inches.
Oh, the HOAs are notorious for this.
So, if there is no central authority, no government mandate forcing people to implement functional corrections, how does this movement actually scale fast enough to matter?
It scales exactly the same way the internet scaled.
Okay, walk me through that. Because the internet required massive infrastructure investment.
It did, but the architecture of the internet is peer-to-peer, is a web of independent nodes.
Right.
It survives and grows precisely because no single server dictates the whole.
So, how does that apply to backyards?
The micro-ecosystem movement scales through what the text calls visibility and neighborhood influence.
So you don't need a national marketing campaign.
No, you need a localized proof of concept.
Neighbor mimicry.
Exactly. When you execute a functional correction in your space, you are visibly demonstrating an alternative to the sterile green carpet.
You are proving that a space can be alive, low maintenance, and ecologically vital.
And there is a compounding pressure at work here too. As global climate patterns become more erratic, maintaining those 40 million acres of pristine lawn is becoming economically and physically impossible.
Right, droughts are triggering severe watering restrictions everywhere.
The cost of synthetic fertilizers is skyrocketing.
So the large centralized artificial systems are failing under their own weight.
They are. And as they fail, they leave a vacuum.
And these decentralized, highly visible, drought-resistant native yards naturally fill that vacuum.
The ecosystem isn't waiting for an HOA board to give it permission to survive.
It responds instantly to whatever physical participation it is offered.
That reframes the entire emotional landscape of the climate conversation, doesn't it?
It really does. We are conditioned to feel absolute powerlessness because we are waiting for a rescue ship.
But realizing that you can be an active, functioning node in a resilient web shifts you from despair to immense localized power.
Which brings us to the final narrative arc of the sources we are exploring today.
Right, the culmination of all this.
Because all of this technical discussion, the biological timelines, the lock and key native plants, the decentralized corridors, it all culminates in a tangible, physical event.
The text, the invitation of return, covers this beautifully.
It does, because when you actually step out of observation mode and execute this functional correction, you eventually witness the physical result.
And the text is very honest about how this begins. It does not start with fireworks.
No, it starts with a period of agonizing quiet.
Agonizing is the right word.
The narrative describes a homeowner who finally stops mowing a corner of their property. They leave the dead stalks standing through the winter.
They place a simple, shallow ceramic dish filled with water and river stones near the brush.
They stop spraying weed killer. And then they just stare at it for weeks.
You can imagine the internal doubt.
Oh, absolutely. The sterile aesthetics of the neighborhood are looking at them, judging the messiness, and seemingly nothing biological is happening.
The lone wolf protocol feels like a total delusion in that moment.
Like you've made a mistake.
Yeah.
But then the text details the shift. One morning, the texture of the air changes.
A solitary mason bee, a species that hasn't been seen in that specific zip code for a decade, is suddenly hovering over a newly bloomed native flower.
A monarch butterfly lands on the milkweed.
A toad takes up residence near the water dish.
The text uses this hauntingly simple phrase, "What was once empty becomes visited."
I love that line. The space stops being a static display and becomes an active intersection of life.
The profound realization the text emphasizes here is the concept of the return.
Right. When individuals witness this explosion of life in a previously dead space, their first instinct is often a sense of godlike creation.
They feel they have built nature.
But the text corrects this arrogance immediately. You are not creating anything.
You are simply allowing the natural world to return.
Exactly. You aren't engineering the biology, you are just removing the barriers.
Nature does not demand perfect, laboratory-grade habitat engineering from us.
It simply requires a baseline of opportunity. The life, the insects, the birds, the microscopic soil bacteria, it is all out there, pushed to the margins, waiting desperately for a foothold.
When the hostile interference is removed, life responds immediately.
The analogy that jumps out to me is unblocking a dam.
Oh, tell me about that.
Imagine a river that was dammed up 70 years ago. The riverbed below the concrete is dry, dusty, and completely devoid of aquatic life.
Right, completely dead.
If you decide you want the river to flow again, You don't have to carry millions of buckets of water from the reservoir and throw them down the dry bed.
You don't have to push the water.
The water already possesses the kinetic energy.
Exactly. All you have to do is remove the obstruction. You take a sledgehammer and pull a brick out of the concrete dam.
And the massive, pent-up force of the water does exactly what it is biologically driven to do.
It rushes back in, it finds the lowest ground, it carves the channels, and it brings life with it.
So planting a native oak tree or tearing up a section of chemically treated lawn is just pulling a brick out of the dam.
And that reality shatters the dominant cultural doom narrative.
Completely. We are constantly fed a media diet suggesting that ecological decline is an absolute, irreversible one-way street.
That we have crossed a terminal threshold, and the best we can do is manage the slow slide into extinction.
That's the ultimate trap of observation mode, assuming the patient is already dead.
But these ground-level returns prove empirically that the decline is not irreversible.
When the chemical pressure is lifted, dormant seed banks in the soil that have been suppressed for decades suddenly activate.
But the texts add a severe caveat to this hope. Recovery is not automatic.
Right. The biodome will not heal itself while we continue to aggressively maintain 40 million acres of sterile green carpet.
The return must be actively invited.
Recovery is not automatic. It must be invited. That is a brilliant summation of the entire philosophy.
Let's synthesize this journey for everyone listening. We started by confronting the harsh, pragmatic reality of the lone wolf protocol.
The realization that biological timelines cannot wait for the massive, slow-moving cargo ships of global policy.
We examined how modern environmental awareness can paradoxically trap us in observation mode,
Making us feel like we are participating when we are actually just absorbing digital tragedy from a safe distance.
sitting on the couch reading fitness books.
Exactly.
We looked at the ground-level mechanics of breaking that paralysis,
Right.
the micro-ecosystem movement,
The functional correction of tearing up the lawns and replacing them with native lock-and-key habitats.
eliminating systemic neonicotinoids and providing the resources for life to complete its cycles.
We analyze the architecture of how these individual actions scale, moving from isolated islands to decentralized, resilient biological corridors.
Corridors that can route around the failures of centralized human infrastructure.
And finally, we witness the immediate visible magic of simply removing the dam and allowing life to rush back into the spaces we control.
All of this distills down to a single, empowering truth. Your specific physical footprint matters.
It really does. Whether you manage a sprawling acreage, a small suburban lot, or just a balcony with enough room for 3 pots of native asters,
That geometry is a critical node in a distributed network.
your physical actions dictate whether that space remains a lethal desert or becomes a vital stepping stone.
You are not waiting for rescue. You are the infrastructure of the rescue.
You possess immense agency right where you are standing.
And as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you, the listener, with one final thought to mull over.
It's the big one.
It is. We've spent the last hour looking at how the global biodome is surviving, not through massive, coordinated, centralized policies, but through the quiet, distributed, ground-level rebellion of individuals doing what they can with the soil in front of them.
Right.
It makes you wonder if the most complex system on Earth, the global ecosystem, responds best to localized, decentralized action.
Yeah.
What other massive, seemingly unsolvable crises in our society are just waiting for us to stop staring at the horizon, look down at our feet, and start building our own rafts?
Don't wait for the ship. Grab the driftwood.
Exactly. Thanks for taking this deep dive with us. We'll see you next time.